All right, so um, diving in here, we've got this document, documento.txt, and wow, it's a wild ride.
Yeah,
It's about this rapper, Diddy,
it is.
and the allegations against him are, well, they're intense.
Yeah.
We're talking sex trafficking, drug use,
Yeah.
extortion.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just one person, right? You start to think about the systems, the power dynamics, especially in an industry like music.
Exactly. That's why this deep dive feels so important. This isn't just a celebrity scandal. It's about understanding a bigger problem.
Right. And you often see these stories start the same way. Someone with power, like this famous, wealthy musician, they create a certain atmosphere, you know?
Yeah, the document talks about these crazy parties, freak of parties, they call them. DiCaprio was there, Paris Hilton, even Prince Harry.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of guest list, it's intentional, right? It creates this air of exclusivity, like you're in this inner circle.
Totally. And for someone young trying to make it in music, that can be intoxicating.
Absolutely. They want to be a part of it.
And that desire, that's where it gets dangerous.
Yeah.
Because it can make people vulnerable. And that's where the document takes this dark turn. We go from parties to, well, some really disturbing allegations.
The document talks about these smaller gatherings like VIP or after parties,
Right.
and that's where things allegedly went way too far. Diddy using his influence to pressure people, a lot of young women, into situations where consent was at best questionable.
It's like this facade of glamour,
Yeah.
And then behind it, the document even mentions a dress code for these gatherings, all white.
Interesting.
Which seems random, but could it be a way to control people?
Oh, absolutely. Uniforms, they create a sense of group identity. People become less individual, more willing to follow. It's a classic tactic.
And in this controlled environment with, like you said, maybe they're less likely to question things, that's when the allegations get really serious.
Yeah, that's where the document starts mentioning drugs, specifically ketamine and ecstasy, being used at these smaller gatherings.
Right, and it's not just like casual use, it's
And that's a huge red flag, right? You're talking about substances that can lower inhibitions, make people more vulnerable.
exactly, and it gets worse. The document accuses Diddy of making sure there were always drugs at these events, and this is awful. He even says some women were drugged without knowing.
Yeah, and at that point, you're not talking about questionable consent anymore. You're talking about situations where consent couldn't even be given. It's horrifying.
It really is. And then it goes even further. The document says Diddy was filming these encounters.
Oh, wow.
And often, the people involved, they had no idea, no consent to being filmed.
That's a classic power move, right? It's about control. You have this recording, you can use it to silence someone. They're afraid to come forward, afraid of what might happen.
It's like being trapped.
Yeah.
But you said this kind of thing. It's not unusual in these situations.
Yeah.
So are we saying there's like a pattern of this abuse in the music industry?
Well, it's important to remember that these are still allegations against Diddy, and he deserves a fair trial. But sadly, yeah, the music industry, any field with power, young talent, it can attract this kind of abuse.
And it makes sense. This system that can be taken advantage of. And then in this case, you have Diddy, who allegedly did just that. So how long had this been going on, did the document say?
That's one of the most disturbing parts. The document suggests this wasn't a one-time thing, that this pattern of behavior might go back decades to the late 90s.
Decades. Seriously.
Yeah.
It mentions Diddy's ex, who's a pretty big singer herself. She came forward with the accusations, but not until 2023. Why wait so long?
It's never easy to come forward in these situations, especially when it's someone as powerful as Diddy.
Why?
The fear is real, retaliation, not being believed, your career being over.
It's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
But the document mentions other accusers, right? Like after Diddy's ex went public, others came forward too.
Exactly. One person speaks out, it can give others the strength to do the same.
So it's like a good kind of domino effect. Breaking the silence, it helps other people break the silence.
Yeah, it's a glimmer of hope, even in all this darkness. It shows how important it is to speak up, to hold these people accountable, and to support survivors, believe them, create a safe space.
You mentioned earlier about systems of exploitation, especially in the music industry. Did the document talk about Diddy abusing his power in other ways, not just at these parties?
It did, and it's a really important point. The document talks about a music producer who says Diddy sexually harassed him, even propositioned him.
Wow.
And get this, Diddy apparently tried to brush it off like it was normal, just how things are in the industry.
That's messed up on so many levels.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one type of person or situation
Yeah.
and then trying to make it seem okay, like it's part of the industry.
Exactly. It shows how these power dynamics work. They stay silent, create a culture where this is accepted.
The document then goes on to talk about the police raid on Diddy's mansion in March of 2024. They found over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricants, plus 3 AR-15s with the serial numbers partially scratched off. Hold on, did this just turn into a true crime drama? What's the significance of all that?
It's easy to focus on the more dramatic details, but everything matters in an investigation, right? The baby oil, strange as it sounds, could back up what witnesses are saying. It might show a pattern of behavior.
So even weird details can be important.
Exactly. And the guns, those illegal weapons, just add another layer to it. It shows a disregard for the law, a willingness to take risks, maybe even be dangerous.
Like you said, every detail matters. But this is a lot. Diddy is still saying he's innocent. He even said he buys baby oil in bulk because it's cheaper.
Right, and it's important to remember everyone is innocent until proven guilty. He deserves a fair trial. But you can't ignore the amount of accusations, the details in the document. It looks bad.
So the investigation is going on. Diddy is facing some serious charges. Extortion, sex trafficking, even transporting people for prostitution. What does all that mean for him? What could happen? Yeah, those are some serious, serious charges.
Absolutely. We're talking potentially years in prison if he's convicted. And even beyond the legal stuff, his career, his whole life, it's all on the line now.
And what about the victims here? If even half of what's in that document is true, it's hard to imagine what they're going through.
Exactly. Abuse, exploitation, it leaves scars, mental, emotional, even physical sometimes. We have to do better as a society, support survivors, make sure they have what they need to heal.
It's so easy to forget that, isn't it? We get caught up in the headlines, the drama, but there are real people at the heart of this.
Right. This isn't just gossip. It's a reminder of what happens when someone with power abuses it, and that we all have a responsibility to call that out.
And speaking of calling things out, the document mentions Justin Bieber, right? He was supposedly close with Diddy, especially early in his career. Was there anything more to that?
Well, we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions. The document doesn't really give specifics about Bieber's involvement.
Right.
But it does make you wonder, especially thinking about how young artists can be vulnerable in that world.
Exactly. It all comes back to what we were talking about, power. The risk of exploitation, building an industry where people are safe and accountable.
Exactly. Cases like this, guilty or not, they should make us think. Look at the system, ask the hard questions, push for real change.
So after all this, where do we even go from here? What should people listening take away from a deep dive like this? It's intense.
It reminds us that behind all the fame, the money, the image, there are just people. And people can do good things and really bad things. We can't forget that. We got to be smart about what we believe, understand how power works, and most importantly, fight for a world where everyone feels safe enough to tell their truth.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your insights. This has been a lot to process.
Of course. Glad to be here.
And to everyone listening, thank you for trusting us to unpack this with you. This has been The Deep Dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay compassionate. We'll see you next time.